One APIA Nevada is a grassroots nonprofit organization that advocates for policies empowering everyday Asian Pacific Islander Nevadans. Nevada is home to a growing APIA community, accounting for 1 in 10 voters. We are One APIA Nevada. Concili Incorporated is Nevada's premier Democratic campaign firm. Fighting for progressive issues and candidates for over a decade, and proud sponsor of Battleborn Progress. Tonight's episode of Out in Front is brought to you by our season sponsors, Concili Inc., Nevada State Education Association, One APIA Nevada, Silver State Voices, and Stefan and Marta Schmidt, as well as our episode sponsors, Save Lives Nevada and Washoe Education Association.
Out in Front with Annette. My name is Annette Magnus, and I'm the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. So excited to have you this evening for our very special program with one of my sheroes, Congresswoman Dina Titus. We are talking about her new legislation that she just rolled out today for the new potential monument here in Nevada. We've worked on several monument campaigns together. She and I worked on the Gold Butte campaign. We worked on Tule Springs together. We worked on Basin and Range. And now we are working on hopefully getting a Avi Kwa Ame National Monument. So Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you back on the show. Talk to us about everything that goes into a national monument and what this means for Nevada.
Well, Annette, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to see you. And thank you for all that you and Battleborn Progress have been doing to educate the public about this issue, advocate with lawmakers about getting it over the finish line, working to organize a lot of the different groups that are supporting it. As you've just done a great job, and I thank you for that. I also think it's great that we're going to be on here with someone who represents the indigenous people's interest in this, because it's not just about recreation, it's not just about the economy, it's not just about the environment, but it's also about saving a sacred place. And so that will be very important to hear about as well. I'll just go over a few of the facts about it, if you don't mind. We introduced the bill today, and we're going to be pushing it through the rest of this session. But basically, I'm just carrying the water at the congressional level. You all have done so much work on this, and you've done it the right way. You had all the stakeholders at the table, including some people you thought might not have been supportive, like the off-road vehicle people or the Chamber of Commerce of Laughlin, Boulder City. Everybody was there to talk about it, talk about their needs, adjust the lines, and draw those lines. So we are using your lines put into federal legislation. It's nearly 450,000 acres in southern Nevada that will link to other areas that are kind of already protected in the Mojave Desert. This started back in 1999 when Spirit Mountain, which is kind of the central focus of this, was placed on the Register of Historic Places. But the Mojave Desert surrounding the mountain wasn't protected. It just stayed in BLM territory. So the objective is to protect all that surrounding area, to save it for posterity, to preserve those historical cultural relics that are there, to help with the endangered species, both flora and fauna, some iconic wildlife from the Southwest live in that area. And so it's for all of those things. If you stop and think about it, in addition to that, people are very supportive of this. If you look at all of the public opinion polls, a vast majority of people think we should save this. The legislature passed the 30 by 30, and that's the Biden initiative, have 30% of the lands preserved by 2030. This will go a long way towards Nevada doing its share to preserve that land in the 30 by 30. Also, our tourists who are coming back now that we're hopefully getting over the COVID pandemic, don't just want to see the Strip, they want to see the beautiful landscape around Las Vegas. And so we'll preserve this, we'll use it for outdoor recreation to support the economy and the jobs there. And we'll get people coming back to enjoy what's off the Strip, kind of the other Nevada, which is the beautiful wildlife and geological formations and areas that we have here in the desert. So we have about 14 million people who like to visit national parks. And this is especially true of our foreign tourists. We become part of kind of a loop. They come to Los Angeles, San Francisco, the Grand Canyon, and to Las Vegas. And in Las Vegas, they stay longer, they spend more money, and they want to get out and see the beautiful Wild West that they may have only seen in movies. We've got support of the Chamber of Commerce of Boulder City that's now in my district because of the economic reasons, and also Laughlin. The Clark County, thank you for your help there, has just recently passed a resolution saying they support it and they want to see legislation. Now, there are two things that can happen. We can either get the bill passed, and that's tough, but we have a sympathetic chairman of the committee in the House, Mr. Grijalva, who likes preserving land, or it can be done under the Antiquities Act by the president. But the president's not likely to do that until the end of the year after the election. And also he's not likely to do it if there's not legislation and public support for it. So either way we go, I think we've got our bases covered thanks to all the good work y'all have been doing.
Okay, so let's break this down. Put on your political scientist hat for me.
Okay.
At the federal level, we are going to go through a federal process now. Right. There was a lot of confusion at the county commission this week by some of the folks maybe in Cal Navari and some of the other things that, first of all, Cal Navari is not included in this. Searchlight's not included this, but they will benefit from this because
Right.
People will come to that area. So talk to us about the process, because the process is truly a federal process. And what will that look like so that people understand it at home?
Okay, we will put together a package that includes the legislation, and in the legislation is the boundary. That boundary was drawn by you all in conjunction with BLM. You made some accommodations for some solar energy projects. You made some accommodations for areas where they use off-road vehicles. You are keeping intact some of the roads and trails that have been there before. And the BLM is on board with this. So we're taking that map and putting it in legislation. We introduced it this week. It'll go to the Natural Resources Committee. We hope to have a hearing, hope to get it passed, sent to the Senate. The same thing will happen there. While this legislation is making its way through, just like any other bill would, we will also be pushing the administration, the Department of Interior, with Deb Haaland, who we think will be more sympathetic than previous secretaries, and also with the president to get him to use his authority under the Antiquities Act just to go ahead and designate it. If he does that, you don't need to pass the law. But having that law, having all these polling numbers, having all of these groups signed on gives him some justification, some backup, makes it easier for him to do it kind of as a fait accompli under his authority. Either way, it becomes a permanently protected area. It's a national monument under BLM. So that means that land will be preserved as such designated.
And, you know, we have had several monuments designated by the Antiquities Act. It is something that was created by Theodore Roosevelt. A lot of those protected lands are still protected today that he created these with. But also we've done monuments through the legislative process. So it can be done both ways, right? And so
that's correct.
If you have this bill, then you have a placeholder, but we can also do it this way, right?
That's exactly right. The bill gives force to the attempt to get the president to do it. If he, for some reason, doesn't get to it because so much else is going on, we can still move forward with the bill. So one complements the other. It's not an either or at this point.
Got it. Okay, so the next part of this is if this moves forward legislatively, or if it moves forward through the Antiquities Act, how long do you anticipate this taking? I know Gold Butte took a lot of time because it was very complex, but this is different. This is kind of easy, like you talked about. We've got all the big players in you know, on our side. We've done the legwork to make sure this really works. People like Alan and others on the campaign have been working for this for years.
Right.
So what is the timeline now that you've introduced this legislation today?
Well, this bill will have until next December. That's the term of office. If it doesn't pass during that time, we'll reintroduce it. And that's like Gold Butte. You know, sometimes you can't get something done in one Congress, but you can reintroduce it and continue in the next Congress. Usually designations for monuments under the Antiquities Act don't come until after the election. It's kind of a lame duck period. The election's over. They can't get it tied up in some of the other political things that are going on in that election. So if that were to happen, that probably won't happen until next December too. But the thing is, if you wait and you keep waiting before you introduce it, it will never happen. And if you think that this started in 1999, when Spirit Mountain was first designated, we've already been going a real long time. And you're right, Alan O'Neill is a great expert on all of this. I trust him. He knows this better than anybody. And all of you at the table, like I said in the beginning, have done it the right way. There's not a lot of complaining that people can do that they didn't have a voice or have a chance to make a difference. And you've been amazingly agreeable to accommodate some of those demands. And I think that you've been more than fair doing that. So we're not taking anything really away from anybody. We're just enhancing and protecting what's there.
Absolutely. Okay, next question. And we are getting a lot of questions from the viewers. I know you got to hop in a few minutes, but if you have questions for Congresswoman Titus, now's the time. She's the expert. So you're going to want to ask. So how can Nevadans who are watching this tonight, who are sharing this with their friends and family, how can they help you get this over the finish line and get this important sacred area designated as a national monument?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because nothing is ever easy, no matter what you think it's going to be. So the more support you have, the better. I would say call your own member of the congressional delegation and get them to sign on. Stephen Horsford, Susie Lee. This should be a Nevada issue, not specific to one district or another. And our senators, Catherine Cortez Masto is interested in public lands. She has a public lands building that's not this monument, but is complementary to it. So write letters, make phone calls, send emails, and let's get the whole delegation united behind this. That will be an important first step.
Yeah, and for those of you at home watching, we have a petition that our coalition of so many organizations are working on. You can sign the petition. That petition will go to your elected officials as well. It will help Congresswoman Titus in her quest to get this designated as a national monument. So the link is honораvikwame.org, and we are putting that in the chat because I know it's quite a bit to spell, but it's honor, KWAAME.org. And that'll be in the chat. Just click the link in the chat and you can sign our petition tonight.
Annette, you
Yeah.
might want to just mention all the many diverse groups that have already signed on, so people will know it's not just a narrow focus, it's all kinds of different organizations.
Yeah, so everyone from the International Dark Skies Association to the Nevada Conservation League, Taylor's organization, Taylor will be talking in a second, Native Voters Alliance of Nevada. We have so many different groups. We have Conservation Lands Foundation. We have the Wilderness Society. I mean, you name it, they're signed on to this in Nevada and supporting this in Nevada. So we're very excited to have them all. And like you said, we're working with the OHV community. We're working with folks who like to hike, folks who like to do outdoor recreation, the indigenous, the tribal communities down in that area. So we've really done a lot of outreach, and shout out to Craig, who's our campaign manager, because he's been doing a lot of work as well. All right, Congresswoman, I want to switch gears for just a second, and then we'll get to a couple audience questions before you have to hop off. You know, you all have been doing a lot of work in the House around some really big bills. You obviously passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and we're finally starting to receive some of that funding from that infrastructure bill. So thank you for supporting this historic measure. Would you like to talk about this accomplishment and what it actually means for Nevadans and what other things you're working on in Congress right now?
Well, thank you, Annette. It is a big accomplishment. Too often we talk about what we haven't gotten done instead of bragging about what we have gotten done, because it's made a big difference, and it's going to make an even bigger difference as more of that grant money starts to roll out and these shovel-ready projects get underway. That was an infrastructure bill, and I'm on that committee, so I was involved in drafting and promoting it, and I was proud of that, because we need infrastructure in Nevada because we import everything from lobsters to people, so infrastructure is important to us. If we can get funding to build I-11 to Phoenix, or finally get a super speed train, or just help move people around here in the valley with mass transit, those will be big improvements for us. And that's what's in this bill. In addition to that, you've got an expansion of internet. You know, so much of Nevada's rural, out nowhere places, small little communities that don't have access to internet. But also in my district, in the heart of Las Vegas, you've got the older schools and the inner city communities. They don't have access to internet. So if we can broaden that network, that will be a great improvement as well. Another thing is improvement of water systems and getting rid of lead pipes. And there's a provision in there for water conservation, which you know we need if you just go out to Lake Mead and see that bathtub ring, how low water is. This will provide some funding for a project between California and the US and Nevada to recycle and conserve water. And that will be a big plus. So all of those things are in this. It's a physical infrastructure bill. It's more about building things, transportation, bridges, roads, that sort of project, not the human side. We're still working on that. That's more of the things like the expansion of Medicare, health care, child care. That's the human infrastructure, and that's our challenge when we go back next week.
All right, well, let us know how we can help you with all those things, because we need to get some stuff done. All right, a couple audience questions, and then we'll let you hop to the other call you have tonight. So I really like this question. What will a national monument designation do to protect this land? And what makes you so passionate about protecting this area, Congresswoman?
Well, it's only a little part of my district, so it's not that it's just constituents, but Boulder City is now in the district. But two things. One is that the children who live in my district are inner city children, and they've never been anywhere. Some of them, their only outdoors might be a local park. And if we can provide areas here in Southern Nevada that are beautiful, that are historic, that are natural, that these children can go and visit, what a difference that makes in their quality of life. And the second reason I'm so passionate about it is that my husband loves to get out into the desert in Nevada. He is a big hiker and camper. And if I didn't do it naturally, he'd be my biggest constituent force making me do this. So I guess I do it for both of those reasons.
And you've done it for a long time. So thank you for all of that. When I started working with you, you were working on Red Rock and protecting that. And we limited who could drive out there because they were killing people and killing animals. Right. And so you've been doing this a really long time. So thank you. Our next question says, Congresswoman Titus, thank you so much for supporting Avi Kwa Ame. Will designating this area as a national monument bring any economic benefits to the surrounding communities? I know you talked about that a little bit, but do you want to dive in just a little more?
Well, I've got some specific figures if you want to hear those. Our outdoor recreation lost 6% of its jobs and 13.7 million visitors during the pandemic. And they say that tour companies were cut by 70%. So if we can bring that back, that will make a big difference in some of those communities that are close by, like Laughlin's, why their Chamber of Commerce supports it. So we believe that it will create jobs, bring more visitors, and generate revenue for those communities in a way that they're clean, they're good paying, and they're doing good by doing well, or doing well by doing good, however that saying goes.
All right, Laura asks, what kind of challenges do you feel we will face in getting this legislation passed quickly?
Well, you know, Congress is kind of plagued by stalemate. We can get things passed out of the House pretty effectively, excuse me, but then they go to the Senate and die because the Senate is tied and has the vice president to come in and break the tie. Right now, she can't even do that because they're down one member. Ben Ray Lujan from New Mexico had a stroke and he's not there, so nothing is really getting passed. I think the biggest problem will be partisan conflict, and maybe the Republicans won't vote for it because they think Democrats want it, but it shouldn't really be partisan. And also, the closer you get to an election, the harder it is to get anything passed. Everything becomes intensely political, and people are looking more at their campaigns than they are at making policy. So that's why we need to get this going now, not wait till September or October when the attention will not be focused on something like this.
All right, last two questions. So how does it feel to have such a treasure in your district now, Congresswoman? And will this help the climate?
Well, it feels good. I think, you know, Nevada is not a wasteland. I have said that many times in relation to Yucca Mountain. And one of the ways it's not a wasteland is the beautiful scenery that we have. And as I mentioned, the iconic wildlife and animals and plants and birds and tortoises, all of that. So it's a fabulous place to protect. And on top of that, you lay the indigenous cultural aspects and petroglyphs, and all of that just merits protecting. And so it's very exciting. And it's not just for us, it's for future generations. This is for children and grandchildren that we're protecting this. It helps the climate anytime that you don't have development so densely on all public lands, you know, that you work on air quality, and a lot of that comes from transportation and from building industry, and you have to have sustainable growth. And I think one way to have sustainable growth is to set aside like that 30 by 30 beautiful lands like this so that they won't be developed in the future. And I think that's one way that it helps the climate. Also, if it gets people out of their cars and out there hiking and walking around, that's another good thing too, because transportation certainly contributes to air quality that's not the best.
All right, last question for you, and then you can hop. Dave asked, what is your impression on Biden eliminating student debt? I know this has been an issue that you've done a lot on as a professor. So talk to us about that just really briefly.
Well, student debt has gotten outrageous. People go to school and then they have to pay for most of their adult life to pay off a debt. Biden has said he's not going to eliminate all student debt, but he's doing it kind of bite by bite. Several things you can do is you can lower the interest rate. We have postponed when you have to make payments, and you can eliminate the middleman. These agencies that manage these loans just take a cut and really don't do a very good job. Government could just do it themselves. I think you set a cap on how much student debt exists. But if the only thing you do is eliminate debt as it exists today, 10 years from now, you're going to be right back in the same problem. So you start to chip away at the debt people have now, but you put in reforms so you don't create debt for the next class that goes to school.
All right. Well, Congresswoman, I know you have a teletown hall to get to tonight. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for working on Avi Kwa Ame to make it a national monument. And we can't help to continue working with you on this issue and so many others that you do. So thank you for all your support.
I couldn't do it without you all. So thank you very much.
And just so y'all know, Congresswoman Titus is opening the Progressive Summit next weekend. She's one of our big speakers, so you're not going to want to miss this. So join her next Saturday. She's our big opening speaker, just like always. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Bye.
Have a great evening. All right, I want to bring in Taylor Patterson. She is with Native Voters Alliance of Nevada. She does all kinds of amazing work with us on Avi Kwa Ame, but also on lots of other stuff. She is our new board member as of today for Battle Born Progress. And she is the friend of the show. She's on all the time because we love her sass. So Taylor, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk about Avi Kwa Ame. I'm super excited about this.
Thank you for having me, as always. I think I'm the only person to have friend of the show designation, which is good.
Yeah, you are.
Tough act to follow, though, with the Congresswoman. I think she laid it out really well, and we can get into a little bit more of the nuance.
What do you call the Congresswoman? Because I think it's adorable.
Yeah, she's Queen Titus. I think it's like the perfect title for her. And with no exaggeration, I don't think there would be a lot of our organizations without her leadership. And she's really done so much for Nevada and for the women of Nevada that I just can't even, I gush over her all the time. And I think she kind of likes it.
Well, I gush over her too, because she literally taught me everything I know. And she taught me to be feisty, and she taught me to fight back against, all of these establishment people, even though people think I'm establishment, which is silly to me. But anyways, here's the deal. She is just a badass. And so I'm so proud that she is running this bill. So let's talk about the bill. Let's talk about Avi Kwa Ame. You've been out there. Just describe, I got my little sticker on here and it's got the Joshua trees and all that. I got my Joshua tree earrings on tonight for it. Talk to us about the landscape first. Like, what is out there? What does it look like? Why is this such an important, sacred, special place?
I mean, I think the sticker / Congresswoman Titus was wearing the button version of that sums it up really well. We have a really giant, open, wide desert landscape that's full of Joshua trees, cholla cactuses, greasewoods, all of your sort of traditional Mojave Desert plants, and as well as Mojave Desert animals too. We have tortoises and bighorn sheep and owls and all sorts of critters running around out there that are really native to the Mojave Desert and don't get a lot of space anymore in our, developed southern Nevada. So we have this giant wide open space, but you also have these gorgeous, gorgeous mountains that are so different in geological features. It's so interesting to me because one way you can go and there's these nice little pink mountains, the other direction, they're dark, almost black, and different heights and different colors, sizes, everything is out there. And of course, as you mentioned, you have your famous Joshua trees out there. The third largest Joshua tree in the world is out there. So we have a giant landscape that's full of not just ecological value, but also cultural value. I mean, this space is the point of creation for the Fort Mojave tribe and about 10 other human-speaking tribes as well. And I think we say that, and I don't know if people fully understand what that means. So when we say human-speaking tribes, a lot of our tribes are grouped together by language group rather than by geography or who lived where, that sort of thing. So we have these 10, 11 tribes that are grouped together by a common language family. And so all of those folks basically call Spirit Mountain or Avi Kwa Ame the point of their beginning, and also, really interestingly, the point of their end as well. They have traditional cremation stories that are from that area as well. So we have a lot of tribal involvement in this area, because it's also home to part of the Salt Song Trail as well, which a lot of our Southern Nevada friends will be familiar with, because that is the, again, life cycle of a Southern Paiute person as well. So there is just no shortage of cultural significance in this area. And luckily we have so many insanely gorgeous photos that have been taken, and lots of B-roll footage that's been taken too, that you can find on our avikwame.org. I want to say we have a lot of websites going around these days.
So Taylor, what does Avi Kwa Ame actually mean? And why is having a name that is significant important to this area?
So you'll notice I use Avi Kwa Ame and Spirit Mountain almost interchangeably, because that is, the language breakdown's a little bit more tricky than that if you really wanted to get into the phonetics of it all. But at its simplest form, Avi Kwa Ame breaks down into Spirit Mountain. And that refers not only to the actual Spirit Mountain, which a lot of you can find to go have a hike or a quick off-road drive. And that's the place that's off of Christmas Tree Pass Road, very festively named. But to the Mojave and the human-speaking tribes, Avi Kwa Ame is the entire landscape of that area. And so it's not only this space in Nevada, but it also extends really into California and into Arizona as well. I mean, we see Fort Mojave Indian Tribe is a tri-state tribe. They have lands in all three states, California, Nevada, and Arizona, and their ancestry and cultural heritage go into those three states as well. So we see that entire landscape is Avi Kwa Ame. And I think it's really interesting because we don't see native names used for things a lot. I'm happy that this one is a little bit simpler phonetically and spelling wise, because with a lot of our native languages, we could have some very complicated things happening if we were calling everything by its traditional name. But I think it kind of, it honors and respects, of course, the first people of this land, and just very simply calling something what it's named. That's what it's been called for time and memoriam. And so that's such a sign of respect, but I think it also helps us not get into these issues we saw with, Assembly Bill 88 from Assemblyman Howard Watts, that talked a lot about the geographic naming board and some of the issues of these outdated, sometimes racist, sometimes just plain awful names that some of our geographical places get. And I think what Congresswoman Titus was talking about with a lot of inner city kids visiting this place, we want all of our public spaces to be inclusive. And I think that starts with these Indigenous names. And so it's the basic level of respect, but I think it also saves us a lot of time and money in the future of not having to go back and rename things in 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and I think it's so important because it is a conversation we've had a lot as we've been working on the monument campaigns. And so it's really important to talk about that. You know, one of the things I think people get confused about, Taylor, is, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about monuments in this country, speaking of the kind of the racist terminology and all of that. There are a lot of racist monuments all across the country. So for us, I think it's really important to also specify what kind of monuments we're talking about when we're talking about places like Avi Kwa Ame, when we're talking about places like Gold Butte, when we're talking about places like Basin and Range and Tule Springs, right? Like those are all our monuments, but we're not talking about the same kind of like statue monuments that they're talking about back east and in the South. This is different. So can you kind of talk us through what that means and that protection means?
Yeah, I would honestly argue that our sort of version of monuments are more important than the monuments that we see back east. And that is not like, I love a good trip to DC. I love to see the Washington Monument and all of the things that come along with that. But, a statue of Robert E. Lee is not that exciting to me. Like, I might be alone in that. Maybe all of the Out in Front fans are like Robert E. Lee heads out there and are like willing to die on that hill. But what we see here with our monument designations is the national monument, and it can be used for things like the Washington Monument or Mount Vernon, those sort of places that have historical features. But ours out west are really, I don't want to say more historical, but if we're getting into a competition, our monument areas have been utilized by people of this land for thousands of years. So it goes back a little bit further than a piece of limestone, which is kind of cool to me. But also, it's these giant landscapes. We're talking about almost 450,000 acres is what our proposed national monument for Avi Kwa Ame is. So it's a little bit heftier as well. So it's a giant landscape, all natural landscape, has very little development on it. We have some development for some off-road stuff and some other kind of infrastructure things, but mostly undeveloped. And like I said, I would call it more historical.
Thank you for that. It is. It totally is. I don't want to go to a battlefield, but I do want to go to Gold Butte and Avi Kwa Ame. So, all right. So next up, let's talk about, the federal designation. So the Congresswoman, we just heard from her. She has this bill. We just got the county commission to support a resolution. We've got Laughlin Town Board. We've got Searchlight. We've got Boulder City. They're all supporting this. And now we've got the federal bill, and she told us there's two ways to get this done, either the federal bill or through the Antiquities Act. Are you confident that this is going to help us secure this important federal designation of a monument? And what do you think this process is going to look like?
I mean, I'm not going to pretend to know more than an actual political science professor. Like, the Congresswoman has it totally understood and can probably write her own bills and do all kinds of crazy things that I could never. But like she really laid out in the beginning, this lays the groundwork for either the formal legislative route or for the antiquities route. The Biden administration isn't going to act on something that doesn't have the marker bill already out there. So it was really important for the Congresswoman to kind of sweep in, like she said, and get those really formal parts happening. As far as what happens next, I mean, we have so much support, and I think it's really unique. And I've actually gotten reached out to by other monument campaigns across the states, just asking God, how did you guys get so much variety of support? And I think it's really symbolic that this is the exact right moment and the exact right time to do this particular monument. Like you had mentioned, we have sort of the economic folks tied up in some of these chambers of commerces. We have tribal governments that are on board, even down to Mormon Women for an Ethical Government, which I love to work with because it's not very often that Mormons and Natives are on the same side of an issue. So it's always really cool to get folks that are normally, I don't want to say opposed, but not working in the same spaces into these spaces. So I think we have a lot of really good grassroots support, and clearly the leadership with the Congresswoman, Commissioner Mike Naft, and a lot of our really local levels too, from Boulder City down to Laughlin. It makes me hopeful for sure. This is no shade to the Congresswoman whatsoever. I tend to lose hope a little bit in Congress. That's definitely not her fault, and it's definitely not the fault of a lot of our Nevada delegation. But I think when you're leaving it in the hands of Congress, it's always a little tough, especially because this project is so near and dear to our hearts. But I'm hopeful. I think we've got a lot of really good support. We've been getting a lot of good press about it, and people are excited about the monument.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. So, all right, let's talk to the viewers about all the work that has been done by our Honor Avi Kwa Ame Coalition, which you and I are a part of, behind the scenes to help secure the recent resolution from the Clark County Commission, because it's a really big deal. And when we worked on Gold Butte, we weren't able to get a resolution like this. So I'm really excited that we were able to get unanimous support from the Clark County Commission. And, arguably the Clark County Commission is one of the most important and most significant bodies in the state. Sometimes I think they have more power than the legislature, to be honest, because they control the strip. So talk to us about all that work that went into making sure that happened.
It's tough. And I'll say this as having worked on this and then on Indigenous Peoples Day at the county level before, for being sort of an all democratic body, everybody's opinions are so different, and the issues that everybody on the commission cares about are really different. And what's going to affect Jim Gibson is not going to affect William McCurdy in the same way. And so we have a really diverse commission, which I think works to the benefit of the county, but also can be really tricky when trying to get like all of your ducks in a row. We definitely could not have done it without, as you always brand him, your former intern, Commissioner Mike Naft. He was essential in helping us really communicate to his fellow commissioners why this was essential. And I think at the end of the day, everybody realized, this has such a broad variety of support. How can you deny it? When you have Laughlin Town Advisory Board and Fort Mojave Indian Tribe working together on an issue, it's kind of unstoppable. And so I think we got really lucky that 30 by 30 has happened, the Biden administration's America the Beautiful initiative, because I think there is such an appetite at the local level for some of these new designations. And I think it was overdue. I've been working on this for just over a year, and I'll say the attitude has changed so much in the county commission since then. And I think long gone are the days when Senator Reed would refer to the county commission as a place where politicians go to die. So
yeah, I think it is funny, the changes that we've seen in the county commission. So Taylor, one of the things I love that you talk about when we're talking about this important area is the cultural corridor. I know you don't claim that name, but like I am making that a thing because I think it describes this area like so well. So I want you to dive in a little bit more about the tribal communities that are in this area. Fort Mojave has been just so incredible to work with and such leaders on this issue because this land is their land. But there's so many other tribes in the area, like you said, that call this area home or find this area sacred. So talk about that cultural corridor and how that works together and what tribes are actually there.
It's funny when I think of that phrase cultural corridor, and why I started saying it is I just like have this really old timey vision in my head of all of these different tribes moving through that area. And definitely it was home to people living in that area. But I think what was really significant is the amount of people just utilizing that space and using it to go from one place or next, and how it was home to so many oral traditions and stories. I just had this conversation today with somebody that was like, well, I mean, like how much can really be in that area, right? And I think there's kind of a really linear black and white thinking of, well, for it to be a cultural site or a cultural resource, there has to be a physical resource for it to exist. There has to be an agave roasting pit or a petroglyph or, whatever sort of artifact in that area. But this space goes beyond sort of a traditional artifact thought process. And it really is home to tradition and to story. And I know there's such a mythical idea of like, oh, Native Americans and their stories, but that's really what this is home to. When we talk about the creation story, Fort Mojave and the Mojave people, they feel as though they come from that space. The creator put them in that area to caretake that land and to also utilize that land. And that's just not protecting it, but it's also protecting the medicines that are there, protecting the animals that are there. And a similar thing with the Salt Song Trail as well. Those traditional salt songs tell the story of everything that it means to be a Southern Paiute person. And that has that same connotation of the medicines and the animals and, turn left at this place and you get a body of water sort of thing. So it's everything from very practical knowledge for Indigenous people to very spiritual knowledge. And I just, in my brain, it's like in old timey, railroad crossing, right? Of like, go that way for, the creation for the Mojave people, you head that way for the creation for the Southern Paiute people, because a lot of our Southern Paiute folks to the very, very south where the Chemehuevi people live sort of near Fort Mojave, they had to utilize that space to come up into the Las Vegas Valley to get to their point of creation in the Spring Mountains. So you had a lot of people moving through that land. And I could go so far into it with, the Mojave people were very agricultural. And so they got to utilize one space a little bit more than some of our more nomadic tribes. So they got to really utilize and explore this part of land. And like you said, Fort Mojave has been so wonderful, and I love working with them because they have just been so forthcoming and so open to sharing their stories. And I know as an Indigenous person myself, that's so hard to do. But I loved the chairman when we were at the county commission meeting and they apologized. I'm so sorry for having you wait. And he said, the Mojave people have been here since time immemorial, and we will be here as long as it takes, whether we have to wait another 4 hours or 8 hours or whatever it is. And I think people forget that's land stewardship right there.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because Chairman Williams was so incredible during the county commission meeting. It was so inspiring to hear him, and he just got up there and spoke from the heart, and it was incredible, which leads me to my next question. And for those at home, if y'all have questions for Taylor, put them in the chat, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, wherever you're watching, put it in the chat because we want to answer your questions on all things Avi Kwa Ame, but also if y'all have any other questions or hot takes you'd like for me and Taylor tonight, we're happy to give you those as well. So put them in the chat. So Taylor, speaking of the chairman and all of the good work that he's done, the Fort Mojave tribe has done, the other tribes in the area that have been supporting this because they also support this monument as well. From your perspective, how will this monument designation protect Avi Kwa Ame for future generations? And yes, of course, the tribal people and the tribal nations in that area, but also Nevadans, right? And Californians and Arizonans and anybody else, like the Congresswoman said, who travels here to visit these special places.
So like I was saying earlier, this is such a place of tradition and story, and it needs to be preserved, at least, at the bare minimum for future Indigenous generations. I've been so inspired about all of the youth at Fort Mojave that are so involved and really are hungry for those cultural pieces. They want to know their stories. They want to know their language, and being able to utilize that land allows for those traditions to keep going. If you don't have those spaces to reference, it's really hard for those traditions to continue onwards. And I look at what's happening to a lot of our tribes. My reservation has a big giant fire that's happening right now. There's so many effects of climate change that are happening to so many of our sacred areas that we need to preserve what we have left. And I think it's also sort of a learning engagement too for people that are not Indigenous, because it allows them to have a more well-rounded view of Indigenous people. I definitely shared this a ton, and I share it in jest, but it's also like very sad. But like my mom had to come and tell my school classes what it was to be a Paiute woman. She had to come and educate all of my fellow students on Indigenous things. And I think if we have more Indigenous spaces and more Indigenous people in those spaces, it's a much easier educational piece to be like, these are real people existing today. This is the Fort Mojave tribe. This is the Chemehuevi tribe and Moapa and all of these people that are involved. And so I think it also helps that knowledge gap of Indigenous issues too. But I share this, and I shared this on Out in Front before, like my husband grew up here in the city, was from a very just normal middle-class family and never had visited Red Rock. Like that's insane. And so having these spaces available and having education surrounding them is important for all of our future generations. Because I think when we talk about climate change, how could you feel like that's important if you're not connected to that landscape at all?
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, Taylor, let's get to some audience questions. Some folks want our hot takes on things, so that's good. So the first one comes from Shelby, who's going to be on next, but Shelby has a question for you. And I think it's really actually important. You know, if Avi Kwa Ame is designated a national monument, how can we make sure people are recreating respectfully in such a sacred space?
So I love Shelby for asking this question. Shelby is not a person I'm worried about, and nor are many of the out in front people that are watching. And like the very first thing that comes to my head, which I guess could be considered one of our like classic out in front hot takes, is like, don't be an idiot. And I know that that sounds like, Taylor, don't be so mean to these poor people that just want to enjoy the land. But everybody seemingly that is watching is an adult. They know right from wrong. They know to stay on designated roadways, whether that's an off-road, non-paved road. They know not to take artifacts with them. They know not to mess up petroglyphs and be like T hearts C on the middle of a petroglyph. Like, you understand these general concepts. And I think if you're coming from a really respectful place like Shelby is, and like so many of the out in front viewers, you'll do just fine. And I think it's also really important in the process that you and I do, Annette, when we're talking about these land designations and cultural resources, that we're not publishing or talking about information that could be very vulnerable as well. You also don't want to print a map of like, here are the Mojave and Paiute places that are very most sacred on this point, and this point. So I think it's a two-pronged thing, right? People need to understand and be more respectful of the land, but also we as advocates need to be really careful with what we're sharing and how we're educating folks. So I love Shelby for that. And I will say, if you do want, Shelby will talk about this in a few, if you do want more of my hot takes, as well as some for Mojave hot takes, I will be hosting an Indigenous activism panel at the Progressive Summit. So I'm really excited about that. We do have someone joining us from Fort Mojave Indian Tribe, Ashley Hemmers. And so I think we'll touch on Avi a little bit, and we'll probably touch on a lot more hot takes of don't be an idiot.
Yeah, a lot of us could use a refresher course on don't be an idiot right now. So thank you. Also, that's probably going on something now. It's Taylor Patterson, friend of the show, don't be an idiot. That's your quote from now on. Another great question. What is the night sky over Avi Kwa Ame like? Is it good? Is it a good spot for stargazing? So I know that the international stargazing community is super passionate about this monument. So talk to us about that.
It's funny, I really didn't know what a big deal dark night sky designations were until I started working on this monument. But it takes a lot to get these designations. And I know we have some up in northern Nevada that are already designated as dark sky spaces. But we're actually a little short of them here in southern Nevada because we have such awful light pollution from the Strip. I know some people wouldn't consider that light pollution. They would just consider that nice and gorgeous, but I consider that light pollution. And so the night sky is incredible. We actually had an event out at Walking Box Ranch, and people were taking all sorts of dark sky photos. It's hard to describe the dark sky if you've never really seen it as dark as it can be, but I mean, it's conceptually very hard to tell people, like, you can see the Milky Way. Like, I don't think people understand how that works. I myself am a little foggy on where everything is supposed to be with all the constellations. I was never a Boy Scout. So go out there, try to figure out what the heck the North Star is doing. I don't know. I think that's important to stargazing, but I'll just say with the raw beauty of it all, that's what I'm impressed by. I couldn't tell you what's Libra or Gemini or whatever. Maybe you're more educated on that, Annette.
I have an app on my phone for that nonsense. So.
Yeah, but I will say Walking Box Ranch is one of my favorite spots because the road is so good. And so a lot of the roads we're talking about within the proposed monument are unpaved roads. So that can be a little iffy for some of us with, non 4-wheel drive cars. But the road out to Walking Box Ranch is really wonderful, as well as the road to the Wee Thump Wilderness area. And you'll get wonderful dark skies out there. And according to my husband, who does all of the photography, it takes a little bit of finesse to figure out how to do all of those dark sky things. But with some practice, I think everybody can be a really good photographer.
Absolutely. All right, next question for you. We clearly need to learn more about history from this is from Maria. We clearly need to learn more about history from our Indigenous stewards. What are some resources, Taylor, that you would recommend for all Nevadans to get educated on not only Avi Kwa Ame, but Nevada's Native history in general? And I'm going to add a point to that. Also understanding, especially in this state, what land you live on, because we are living on 27 different tribes' land in Nevada. So how do folks get educated about whose land they're living on as well?
So this is like a multi-pronged part problem, because I don't want to come in here and be like, yes, here's a list of like 400 years of reading material. Hurry up and catch up on all of these Indigenous issues. But I would say like there's definitely some basics that you can cover. I think KNPR did a really phenomenal job with their Native Nevada podcast. I think it was like maybe a 10-part series. Each part covered a different Indigenous topic. I was the guest on it, as were a lot of our cool Nevada relatives. So that's always like a good, easy way to listen. I, of course, am a big giant fan of Sarah Winnemucca's autobiography that she wrote. And it's really easy reads too. So with that, I would say like those are two really easy places to start. For our Northern Nevada folks, I do think, as sort of touchy and sensitive as it is, I do think it's worth it to go to Stewart Indian School, which is home to our Nevada Indian Commission now. And they've done so much work to create a really good museum there and kind of pay tribute to a lot of the horrific things that happened at that school, with also some bright spots in it too. And I will say, like, there's horrifying things that happened at residential schools, but results were mixed. Both my grandparents went, one hated it, one loved it. So, I mean, everybody has sort of a really nuanced view of what happened at Stewart. And so I do think it's worth a trip up there, though, if you're in the Carson City area, to visit that. So those are always resources. You know, I always have to give a plug to myself. We do a really good job at NVAN and are always really open to helping. And I always tell folks, like, never feel bad about asking a question, because I would rather you ask me than some like unsuspecting native that you see on the street where you're like, hey, do you pay taxes? I'd rather you ask me. And so, yeah, and definitely donate to Native organizations, donate to NVAN, donate to Native Organizers Alliance, and some of our like big organizations that are working really hard to organize Native people and to get out Native education.
And Taylor, how do folks, before I get to the question, Tammy Tiger's in the chat talking about the Salt Song trails and all of that important stuff. So talk to us about how you get in touch with NVAN, and we'll put the information in the chat as well, so people can get in touch with you if they have questions or want to get involved.
Yeah, so our website is nativevotesnv.org. We're on every social media. I think Battleborn Progress has tagged us in just about everything we've ever done. I sometimes get disturbed when I see quotes of myself, because I'm like, oh no, did I really say that? But so if you're on Battleborn Progress's pages, you'll see us on there too. We're at Native Voters Alliance and in some form on everything. So, and also big shout out to Tammy Tiger. She does such wonderful work for the Las Vegas Indian Center too.
Tammy is our sister. We love her to death. Thank you, Tammy, for putting all those links in the chat. So Tammy is also adding links in the chat now, which I love. And our staff will be putting the links for NVAN in the chat too. Okay, before we get to our last question, Taylor, talk about the Salt Song trails and what that means, what that is for our viewers, because I know that's really important to not only this monument, but just to Southern Nevada generally.
Yeah, so I think people forget we have our 27 federally recognized tribes here in Nevada, and we have in the state both northern and southern Paiutes. The Salt Song Trail is specific to our southern Paiute or Nuwu people, and the Nuwu Southern Paiutes exist throughout the Southwest. So they're in California-ish, kind of to the little bit of edge there, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. And so the Salt Song Trail acts as this sort of circular pattern that moves through southern Nevada, through southern Utah, all the way around and around and around. And so these salt songs are traditional songs that are sung with a gourd shaker and were originally used as a funeral song. And so those songs, like I had mentioned earlier, tell the life cycle of a Southern Paiute person, and it tells the spiritual journey through those states and through those spaces. And some of the information in the salt songs is, like I said, more practical, of like medicines are in these spaces and those spaces. But a lot of the salt songs are very, very spiritual and very, very heavy, just at the brass tacks of it. And it's really interesting because there's been a lot of discussion on the Salt Song Trail, and a lot of those songs have been lost. And there's some tribes that have more of them, some tribes that have less of them. But it's so important to the preservation of those traditional songs and to the traditional Paiute ways to have access to these spaces. And that cultural corridor that I was talking about, to be able to move through those spaces the way all of our ancestors before us did, is so important. And it makes me feel emotional because it's so heavy to know exactly where your ancestors were for thousands and thousands of years, and to have access to that cultural knowledge that they did, and to know that this was exactly the way you were supposed to live your life. And down to all the weird, very quirky, supernatural, things of beware of owls and don't whistle at night and all those fun, native things. But it's so heavy, and it's such a thing I'm grateful for, is to still have access to so much of that information.
Well, and you and your mom have taught me so much about this information as well, and Barb and all of our friends in this movement. So thank you for sharing that information with us. I did not know about the owl situation, and I love owls, and they're all over my house and my Christmas tree, and your mother won't come in my house when I have them up. So, learned a lot from y'all.
I'll say this, we all get really funny and quirky about these things, but my general consensus on that, and this is like a full, not even Avi Kwa Ame related thing, but this is the Taylor and Annette hot take hour. I think there's nuance to these things, right? And I had this conversation with my mom too, because the Paiute people come from Coyote, we're Coyote people, and Coyote is such a known trickster and like the zeitgeist of our stories and stuff. And there is no good and bad. It's neutral, and it's a good situation and it's a bad situation. And owls bringing death could be a very good situation for somebody, and it could be a very bad situation for somebody. But these things, while they're fun and spooky, are also neutral. It just depends on the situation. So maybe you have some good magic with those those owls.
Well, let's hope, because they're all over the house. Okay. Next two questions, and then we'll get to our friend Shelby for the summit. This one comes from Amber. She says, Taylor, can you talk briefly about what recreation opportunities are available at Avi Kwa Ame? Was it important to include recreation areas and OHV things when you worked on passing the resolution?
Definitely. So I do want to plug our website again, honorspiritmountain.org. That one's a little more palatable to spell out than Avi Kwa Ame. Although I think probably more letters, but still it's in English, so it's a little easier for people to understand. But our wonderful, wonderful, wonderful friend, Alan O'Neill, has put together so many guides on our website for different tours in the area that are so descriptive and so amazing. I just don't understand how he has such a knowledge of every single back road out there. So we do have a lot of those on the website that really showcase some of the cool places that exist within the proposed national monument. And really, OHV is essential. I come from a family that is big in the OHV community and loves to have motorcycle racing and all of the really cool stuff that you can do in the desert. And to me, I don't think there's a well-rounded coalition without those voices in there, because it's important to me that we utilize this piece of land. I think really true blue conservationists definitely feel like, hey, here's this protected piece of land, like now let's all stare at it from afar. And in the indigenous way, the native way, that land needs to be utilized. All of those things are feeding into each other. And it's sort of this circular pattern of everybody getting use out of the land, and the land's sort of getting use out of us too, in a kind of an interesting way. And so OHV was definitely included in this. And we have a really cool community member, Ashley Lee, who's worked really hard to get a lot of that OHV perspective and make sure that the roads that are out there now can still be utilized after the monument is created too. So there's not going to be any wishy-washiness of kicking people out once the monument's created. So there's, of course, the recreation for OHV use, there's hiking and all sorts of the stargazing, all sorts of things you can do out there, whatever you can do in the desert, respectfully, I'll say. That's the caveat.
Right. All right, this last question comes from Anne. She says, you mentioned a few tribes in this area. Can you please list, or maybe give us a list, or where we can go, so we know which tribes stream through this area so we can study it more in depth?
Yeah, so a good place to start is that honorspiritmountain.org website. We have a lot of that information up there. Cursory, just like very easy Google, is human speaking tribes, and you get a nice little handy dandy list of.
How do you spell human?
Oh, thank you. That's YUMAN. And so some of those included, like I said, are the Mojave. There's also the Wallapai, the Havasu Pai, the Pai. Lots of pies happening. Shumash and well, I don't know if it was Shumash. But there's a whole list there that is very extensive and way stretches my brain, because it's like listing everybody. But a lot of that information is on our website as well.
All right. Thank you for that, Taylor. Anything else you want to add about this important place before we bring in Shelby to tell us about the Progressive Summit, which you're speaking at next weekend, the 26th and 27th?
I think we've covered all the ins and outs. I'm just really excited that Congresswoman Titus has shown such great leadership on this and really is trying to work with the other parts of the delegation to move this forward, because this is such an important site that really needs protection. And I would love to work on new projects like for the last year or so. We've really been trying so hard to gather this support and shore up all of our different stakeholders in this, that I think we're in a really good place moving forward. And I hope we get a monument this year, Annette, fingers crossed. And then we can start working on other national monuments, whatever those may be.
You know, I thought our national monument days were over, Taylor, but 4 wasn't enough. We've got to go for number 5 now. I'm super excited about it. I love monument campaigns. It's actually one of my, when I first started here, I had worked on, at Planned Parenthood on women's issues for so long, and reproductive rights issues. And then I was like, what is this public land stuff? And the more I got into it, the more I loved it. So it's one of my favorite things we work on now. So I'm super honored to be working on this with you. All right, Shelby, you ready for your debut? All right, I want to bring everybody up to speed. We have a new development manager at Battleborn Progress and Institute for Progressive Nevada. Shelby Schwartz joined us at the beginning of January. She is our new development manager. She is our fundraising guru, and she is doing an amazing job, and we're so excited to introduce you all to her. She's who's going to be calling you for money and bugging you for tickets and all the stuff. Shelby, give us a breakdown of the summit. We've got some exciting announcements we want to get out to the public right now. So walk us through the agenda, introduce yourself. Welcome to the show.
Hey, everybody. I am so stoked to be making my out in front debut, and also a little nervous, but we're going to power through. We have our 8th annual Progressive Summit coming up next weekend. It has been a crazy last couple of weeks, my first weeks here, getting ready for the summit. And some of my job has already been done for me so far tonight. You know that Taylor will be there with a killer Indigenous folks panel. We have Congresswoman Dina Titus, who's going to be opening up for us on Saturday. And I'm sworn to secrecy. I can't reveal info about the keynotes yet, but we do have some incredible panels that I can give everybody a little bit of a sneak peek about. So like I said, Congresswoman Titus will be opening up for us on Saturday, as she always does. She's incredible. Then we're going to be moving into some fun content about 2022, the election year. This is our kickoff to all things election, and that our first session is about whether or not we are ready. I hope we are. We shall see. Buy your tickets so you can find out if we are. Then we have our incredible comms director, Will Prugman, having a panel about messaging, how we can sell the brownie, not the recipe. I'm sure he'll explain more what that means because it just goes right over my head. And he will be joined by Jiggy Geronimo from the Independent Strategic Research Collaborative to tell us how we can more effectively message what we're selling to voters. We also, this is, I think, my favorite. Am I allowed to swear? I can swear? Okay. So our next panel after that is, and this is a two-parter, Wading Through the Bullshit, which is my favorite session title. And that is very self-explanatory, how to wade through all the bullshit, disinformation, misinformation that we're going to be overloaded with ahead of the 2022 election. And how can we help others combat dis and misinformation as well? That's the important part. There's some folks that might not be as skilled in identifying that stuff. And we're hoping to train everybody up. We also have a session on reaching our friends in rural Nevada. We love them. We're down here in Las Vegas, but we love the whole rest of the state, the 99.9% rest of the state that we are not in. We also have a killer session from our Story Bank organizer, Brenda. She's going to be telling you how to tell your personal story, which is the most important thing. I come from comms. I know that that is the most important part of connecting with any voter. We'll also have a segment on serving our communities. We all saw during the pandemic how useful it was to serve our neighbors, how much they needed us. And this is going to be digging into that. We're still in a friggin' pandemic. We still need to be helping out each other. And this will be a great segment on that. Then we have Taylor about Indigenous activism that I see is now being called the good, the bad, and the ugly. That is news to me. I love it. I'm excited for that one. Then we'll have a killer keynote. Sunday, we also have some more. And Annette, tell me if I'm digging into way too much detail. I'm just very excited. More keynotes that I have to not tell anybody about yet, but I'm very excited about. We're going to have a segment on digital self-defense called Keep Your Privates Private, which I also love. We have some really great titles. If nothing else, just buy a ticket for the titles of these segments, you guys. That'll be with our very own Mike Willoughby and Aaron Seelman from Delete Me, this great service that helps you clear your personal information off the internet. And that's more useful now than ever. We know there's a ton of crazy people out there. We'll have a segment with one of our board members, one of my Emerge sisters, Fahima, on being progressive and a person of faith. But she'll also be joined by my coworker, Bev Schreiber, Reverend Leonard Jackson from Faith Organizing Alliance, and my old coworker, Ender, who's incredible. And then we have Wading Through the Bullshit Part 2. I think those are going to be my favorite segments. But I don't know. Maybe I just like that it uses the word bullshit. Then we'll have a segment called Voting Rights Are Glorious, which is a play on Joe Gloria's name because we love Saint Gloria, or what do we call him? It's Saint Gloria, right? Yeah. That'll be moderated by our friend Emily Zamora from Silver State Voices. And we'll also have one of our board members, Holly Wilborn from ACLU, Eric Jang from ACDC, and some other exciting folks on that panel as well. Then we're going to have my BFF Akiko Cooks from No Racism in Schools hosting Racism and Radicalization, how we got here and how we get out. And she'll be joined by Deshante Marshall, also from No Racism in Schools, and Elijah Hawks. We'll have a panel on gun violence, when is enough enough, which is very important and a big part of the work that we do here, hosted by my coworker, Amber. We'll have Moms Demand Action folks on there. My little Chicago accent just came out right there. And then we'll have Greg Jackson from Community Justice Action Foundation and Robert Shenstrup, who was a survivor of the Parkland shooting, who will be joining us. And then to close it out, my friend and coworker Paula Luna will be hosting our ending panel, Nevada Rolling Forward Together. And that's going to have some heavy hitters on there. We're going to have Ben from Faith in Action, Steve Sebelius, my favorite journalist in Nevada, Christine from Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada from PLAN, Chris Daly from NSCA, and Andre Wade from Silver State Equality. And then on top of all of these incredible panels, I hope you guys caught that. I know I talk very quickly. We're also going to have a ton of electeds joining us. We're going to have Dina, like I said, Congressman Titus, like I said. We're going to have Congressman Horsford, Congresswoman Susie Lee. We're going to be having Attorney General Aaron Ford. There's too many. We're going to have our new Lieutenant Governor, Lisa Cano Burkhead. It's just going to be jam-packed. I'm very excited.
Are you sure you can't give us even one hint of who your keynote speakers are going to be? I speak as a sponsor / panelist / BBP fan.
Not yet, Taylor. Those get announced next week, but we got this full agenda coming to folks on Saturday. So you can send it around to all your friends, get your tickets, and then next week keynotes are getting announced because we're super excited about those. So Shelby.
Yes.
Let's talk about this. Tickets are limited.
Yes.
Scholarships are limited. How do folks get tickets? How do folks get scholarships? And why do they need to get them in now?
You need to get your tickets now because we're using the service called Remo, and we can only have a certain number of people or it will just straight up not work. We need to have just a certain number of people. We're very limited on the number of tickets that we have. We're already, I want to say, approaching 200 folks. And we really, if you want a ticket, you got to get it ASAP. And what was the other part of your question?
Scholarships.
Scholarships, yes. So we know $15, not everybody can do it. We're still in a pandemic. We get it. If you go, I'll have the link dropped in the chat. I want to say it's bit.ly/PS22 scholarship. It'll be in the chat. You can apply for that. We have a lot of stellar sponsors like Taylor, who have donated tickets so that folks can join us if they're unable to. We get it, $15. You might just not have it right now. So we're going to do everything we can to get whoever wants to be there through the door. The virtual door. It's virtual because we believe in science and we're still in a freaking pandemic. So
that's right. That's right, Shelby. We still are. And it's virtual. So we can also do it statewide. And we have speakers coming from all over the state. One other plug that we have on the first panel, we're going to have our national executive director from Progress Now for all 24 of our states on that panel. Anna Scholl, she is a national expert who will be joining us for the very first panel after Congresswoman Titus speaks. We'll have Bradley Schrager on that panel. We have amazing folks joining us for the Progressive Summit. I'm super excited for this one. So you're not going to want to miss it. Next weekend, Saturday and Sunday, February 26th and 27th, lots of tabling partners, lots of sponsors, lots of opportunities to mix and mingle with people and talk to people. That's why I love Remo, the system we use, because you can actually like talk to people in there. One other thing, if you've already bought your ticket, we will be getting you the link to join us later next week. So we haven't forgotten about you. We have you on a list. If you've already got your tickets, you will be getting your Remo link later next week. So don't stress. There's that. Also, if you buy a ticket, you are getting a Battleborn Progress survival kit. It has Battleborn Progress swag in it. We are giving you a tote bag this year. It's super cute. But we got swag from all of our other partners that are sponsoring this year. So stickers and buttons and all kinds of cool stuff. So you're going to want the swag bag as well. And we will mail that to you because, again, we believe in science. So that'll be coming to you later next week as well in the mail. So get your tickets now. Make sure we have your email address for your Remo link. Make sure you get registered. Make sure you get your address to us so we can get you a swag bag. You could come for one day. You can come for both days. We have that option as well. You're not going to want to miss this. Taylor, anything you want to plug about your panel that you're super excited about?
Like I said, we have Ashley Hemmers from Fort Mojave Indian Tribe. She is so kick-ass and has such good perspective on being in the Indigenous space. We have a couple of more panelists too that are from different segments of the universe, including Sarah from Pine Up Printing Press, and she's been in the very traditional art space along with the very non-traditional art space and has seen the great parts and the horrors. And I will just say, like, everybody really should donate to Battleborn Progress. Y'all don't do this for free. This is this is such a service. And I know Shelby was like, oh, I come from the communications background, and that's really how BBP functions and has provided such a service to me and has provided such a service to our community. So I just am really excited always to be a part of, whether it's the summit or your annual fundraiser or whatever. I'm always here to like shill for BBP, sometimes even to the detriment of my organization. So I should also plug myself again.
Yes, donate to Taylor. She does amazing work. We put her link in the chat. All right, Shelby, I know you attended the summit last year. What was your favorite part last year of the summit, and why should people attend?
I think that the platform, so I did attend last year and we were still, in the throes of the pandemic, not that we're not now, but it was great the way that Remo works. You have tables where you're able to still interact with folks, and we have some great sponsors that'll be there like tabling to tell us about their organizations all weekend. So I've attended as an attendee, and now I'm going to be there as a staff member. And I'm just so excited to be able to have a statewide program that's not just local here in Las Vegas. I think that it's incredible that we're able to bring in all these different segments from throughout the state to come and tell us about their experiences and the work that they're doing. And I think that having it virtual sucks that we're still in a pandemic, but we get to connect with folks all over the state. And I'm super stoked for that. And also we have just amazing panels. And I think that as folks in the political space, we tend to spend a lot of time in trainings and, learning how to organize, do comms work, whatever. But these sessions are really applicable to actually the stuff that we're going to be doing this year. And that's so exciting to be a part of, like the kickoff to election season.
Absolutely. You're going to want to get your ticket. Teresa Crawford, I know you're watching at home. Yes, you're on the list. Yes, you're getting your Remo link later next week, just like everybody else. If you've registered for a ticket, you're going to get your Remo link probably Thursday or Friday next week. We'll give you all a call and make sure you got the link. Sometimes it goes to people's spam, but it has to come from Remo, the system we use. So you will be getting that link later next week. Shelby, how do folks get in touch with you if they want to get involved with the Progressive Summit next weekend, or if they just want to get involved with Battleborn Progress? How do folks reach you?
Yeah, so my email, I can also put it in the chat, or have somebody put it in the chat, is Shelby, SHELBIE, not Y, at battlebornprogress.org. I am up for a conversation about what you think we should be doing to raise some money. I'm down to just chat. If you need to bounce ideas, please give me a call. I'm super stoked to be here and be part of the BBP family. I have been such a fan of the work of this org for so long. So now that I'm here, I want to just give it my all. So if you want to be involved at all in any way, shape, or form, summit or otherwise, shoot me an email.
Absolutely. And just to plug too, you are going to meet so many of our staff folks next weekend. We have lots of our staff and our board members on panels, hosting panels. Our staff is hosting panels. I'll be on panels. But we have Brenda hosting. We have Maria Teresa hosting. We have Will. We have Mike. We have Paula, who's so nervous to host. I'm so excited for y'all to meet them. But we also have like Amber from our Northern Nevada office hosting. We have Bev on a panel. So you're going to get to meet all of our staff too, some of our board members. So we're super excited to have you all. So make sure you get your tickets, share with your colleagues, share with your friends. Like we said, we have tickets, we have free scholarships, free FREE scholarships. That's why we do fundraising. We want everybody to attend who wants to attend next weekend. And like we said, all virtual and statewide to keep everybody safe and healthy. So with that, we will put the link in the chat one more time if you want to attend the Progressive Summit. So you can buy a ticket, or you can come as a scholarship. Now's the time to get those tickets. Look for our email on Saturday, this coming Saturday, with the full agenda, the full tentative agenda. And then next week, we will be announcing our big keynote speakers. So we're super excited about that as well. So tune in for all of that information coming to your emails, your text messages, all that. One other note, we will not be having Out in Front next week on Thursday, because we do have the Progressive Summit on Saturday and Sunday. So we want to put all our energy into the summit. So no Out in Front next week. We will be back with you the week after that. So join us then. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Remember to sign our petition to honor Spirit Mountain, honor Avi Kwa Ame. We put the link in the chat for that position, or for that petition. We want to thank Congresswoman Dina Titus for all of her advocacy on this new monument. We hope we can get it over the finish line, but we're going to need your help. Thank you again, Taylor, for joining us. Thanks for all your hard work. And we can't wait to see you all next weekend virtually at our Progressive Summit. So make sure you get your tickets now. See you next weekend, everyone. Have a great week.